do that again and not play the last note? Now that, I like that a lot. That to me sounds like a hunting call. And I would expect some music to follow that would be like the sound of horses chasing a fox, or the hounds let loose. And Mendelssohn composed a lot of songs without words that sound very much like that. It was very evocative music. It created an atmosphere. And once again, it didn't sound complete, but it sounded like an idea that could go somewhere. Okay. Let's have this piano in front, the Boston. Go ahead. I assure you it's possible. And I assure you that many of you have played pieces that start with these notes over and over again. And you've never stopped to think that it's just a C major chord, but it sounds so amazing. How is that possible? Well, let's see what you guys came up with. Let's start over here again. And now each piano, you pick the best tune that you want out of your group, and you can play that tune, okay? Unless you think you have 2 or 3 good tunes. So the Black Essex team. Let's hear something. Hey, that's pretty good. That's the kind of little motif that's memorable, it's snappy. Let's hear it one more time. Not bad, huh? I like it. Does it sound like a complete melody? No, it leaves you wanting some more. Like, what's next? What's the next part of that? Very good. Okay, the White Essex. One more time. That was very good. Again, that's the start of something that's really interesting. It's almost too long, and if it's that long, it's complete. And if it's complete, it's very difficult to break that apart and to develop it. If a melody has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and at least in the style of Beethoven or Mozart, it's really hard to do something with that. But that was very nice. How about is that a Boston as well?
Yeah, Boston.
Okay, middle Boston. That fits the definition of a short little melody that can be developed. Can you guys play that? Now it's a rising arpeggio, and it uses a rhythmic pattern, and that rhythmic pattern repeats again and again. And so you start to expect to hear that kind of a rhythm through the rest of the piece. And whenever you hear that rhythmic pattern, bum, ba, bum, ba, bum, ba, bum, it's going to remind you of that opening melody. So that's the kind of theme that can be developed in a classical way. Now, that idea is almost what we would call a Mannheim rocket. There is a town in Germany called Mannheim, and in the 1700s they put a lot of money into their orchestra because they were a small town and they didn't have a military, but they wanted to make themselves important. So they put a lot of money into opera and music. And they had an amazing symphony, and they came up with some iconic gestures. And one of them was what they called the Mannheim rocket, which was a rising arpeggio that began a piece of music. How many compositions by Beethoven begin with a rising arpeggio? A lot. And so this was a reference to the Mannheim rocket, which sounds kind of like that. I've saved piano in the back, the Black Essex upright for a reason. Oh, that's bum, 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 bum. Rage for a Lost Penny by Beethoven. Can you do that again? Bum, 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 bum. Do that again. Okay, now play forte and in a very excited way, faster. Yeah, that's Rage for a Lost Penny by Ludwig van Beethoven. Congratulations, that's good. In coming up with an idea, you've hit on an exact idea that Beethoven himself used. Now, Beethoven's piece is about 5 minutes long, but it's based on that simple idea. It's excellent. Okay, Lucas. And so hopefully you stop thinking of the scale as just a scale and you start to realize that oftentimes a scale is the same melody that you heard in the beginning with the notes filled in. And once again, we'll look at an example like that Beethoven uses in his sonata. So using those ideas, I tell you what, why don't we jump to the Mozart sonata here, arpeggio, and 4 bars later he fills in the rest of the notes. We have a falling arpeggio, he fills in the rest of the notes there. You put the two together, what do you get? A rising, falling scale. And that's why these ideas sound right. When you hear them, you think, okay, well, we went from arpeggios to scales, but for some reason they seem connected. Now let's look at this from another perspective as well. Starting with the melody note here, what is the range of notes that all the notes are contained into the melody? That means what is the lowest note and what is the highest note of the melody? What is the lowest note? What is the highest note of the melody? From C to, oops, sorry. What is the low note? I was blocking it. What is the low note and the high note? We go from C to C and back down. So what is the melody in the G major section? Just note that. One more time. Okay, just the first three notes. That sound familiar? What is that? The G major chord going down. Oh my God. Was this an accident? Did this just happen by magic? What are the first three notes of the entire sonata? You played exactly as written. So we have a rising arpeggio in C at the top. Now go down to the first three notes in G. We have a falling arpeggio in G. So the two ideas are related. They're more related than you can imagine them. Can you play this backwards? Play twice as fast as that. So the melody in G is the same melody in C, played backwards at twice as fast. Yes? I know, when I saw that and I realized that, I was amazed by that. No one else is amazed by that. They're one of the most iconic melodies and sonatas that we have in history, and it's just a simple rising arpeggio, and then the same thing backwards, just twice as fast. You have a new melody that's just as gorgeous. Okay, stop. Next chord. Okay, just had to finish that. Now you understand, hopefully you can understand this section as well. What is this section made up of? It starts with a rising what? Arpeggio, yeah. These are not trick questions. I tell all my students that keep in my Keyboard Live class, I do not ask difficult questions. I ask super obvious questions, and the first thing that pops into your head is almost always the right answer. And everyone thinks, you must want something really profound that I don't understand. No, I just say the first thing that comes into your mind. So the melody begins with a rising, and then we have a falling arpeggio. And what did the entire piece begin with? Can you start from bar 1, C major? And go to the first measure in G. So the whole piece begins in C major with a rising arpeggio. Then when we go to G, we have a Mozart. You can't concentrate on these ideas when you listen to the music. It's so beautiful. You're just carried away with the music. And the beautiful craft, the incredible, intelligent craftsmanship of the piece is just seamless. It's not like he's saying, I'm so smart, listen to me. It's just gorgeous, beautiful music every single moment. All right. Let's jump ahead. How do I get this? Oh, Mozart's just playing fast notes and arpeggios. It sounds beautiful and like it's an inevitable part of the piece, correct? How do you describe this? What is this? Which direction? Rising, and then? There you go. So he's taking the same two ideas, a rising arpeggio and a falling arpeggio, but instead of separating them by a beat, now they're just tumbling one after the next really quickly. He comes up with a new idea. Okay. Let's go over the rest of this a little bit more quickly. Knowing that this is the basic material, Mozart then can show dramatic action. And in my mind, the development of this piece, the part that comes after the double R here, is an argument. How do we know it's an argument? Like just from here until here to stop. We know it's an argument because it goes from major to minor. Now it's a little bit darker. And what's happening here? Okay. So we have rising scales and falling scales just like in the first half, except now one part has a falling scale and the opposite part has a rising scale. It's two people facing each other arguing. We have section in D minor. Now what? We have the right hand rising and the left hand falling. They're still angry at each other, but they're no longer talking. They're standing back to back. They won't even look at each other, but they're still fighting. Are there any husbands and wives here? This has never happened in anybody's marriage ever, right? Never. Ever. Okay, how many times today? All right, now, notice that starting here, all of the lines begin to descend. When we get to this part of the piece, they start getting along. And we go from minor back toward major. And so the argument is ending, we're going to get along again. You start from where you stop, and then take it to right here. And we're back on. Can you sort this up? Good. So when the lines are following each other and going in the same direction, now they're going to make up. The argument's over. So it was a very brief argument. This must have been like, what do you want to drink? I don't know, what do you want? It wasn't a major blow up, just a little one. And what I like about this is the shape of the scales going down and then up. And the first time we hear scales in this piece, what is the direction? They go up and down. So it's just the same idea turned upside down. And that's why when you hear this, you hear an idea that was the start of the sonata, of the scale section, now ending it. The only other thing that I want to point out to your attention is what is the key that we started? When we come to what's called a recapitulation, or the return of the main idea, what key are we in here? F major. We're supposed to be in C major, right? What are we doing in F major? That's crazy. Well, actually, at this time in Mozart's day, the subdominant and the tonic were both ways that you could resolve a theme. And so if a theme were played in the subdominant, it would be almost the same thing as playing it in the tonic. And so Mozart does this in at least two of his sonatas. Beethoven does it in a couple of his sonatas. Scarlatti does it in a lot of his sonatas. And so the subdominant has kind of a relaxed function, where you take the tension, and if you play something in the subdominant, it's a way of easing and relaxing. Going, ah. Okay. Hopefully you appreciate this sonata a little bit more now, and you're a little inspired to look at the music that you're playing, to see if some of these ideas fit the music that especially the classical sonatas that you're learning with your teachers. You can take a quick little bathroom break. You go to this piano. You guys take the opening octave, and what can you do with that opening octave to make it interesting? Just the octave. That's all I'm going to give you. Now, I will allow you to use passing tones and appoggiaturas, okay? So you can try to decorate that. You're going to only have 2 minutes to do this because we have to end around 8:50 to this time we can close the shop. Let's go to Alyssa. You want to go back to the White from Essex and the 2 ladies you were playing with? I want you to take the bass. I want you to take that bass figure. It's rising, just a rising arpeggio, right? How many other accompaniment figures can you develop from just that rising? You can repeat notes, so if you go up, you can go up and down. You can go up and up and up and up and up and up, or down, 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 down. Just the bass notes. See what you can do with it, okay? How about this piano here? Harp and piano here. Take the first 3 notes. D, E, B flat. See what you can do with that. And low. this, and then I'm going to ask you to play backwards.
Yeah.
Okay, so he took the octaves, and instead of playing them broken, he played 2 octaves, one in each hand. And then you see, I use the half step that we have 2 half steps: A sharp, D, F sharp, G. He was using those half steps but played in octaves. Yeah? Okay. And your partner? Okay. Alright, that's interesting. That's actually something Liszt would do.
Yes.
What if you were to take that octave and instead of playing it as an octave, play it separately but fill in all the notes in between D and D? Okay, remember that. Keep that in mind. That's more like Liszt. At least the first I do it more Beethoven. Okay, white piano. They have the left hand. Stretched out, okay. So pay attention to that, especially in the bass line. And if there are any long notes, check to see if the long notes skip in that shape. They might. They might. I can't think of an instance, but they might. And that's definitely something that composers do. They take an idea, they stretch it out, and they make it a bass line. Okay, the upright piano Essex. Mark, what do you got? So I gave you the first 3 notes, right? Can you play just the first 3 notes? Okay, just stay there and do that again and again and again. Faster and faster and faster. 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 Okay, now put the downbeat on the top D. So keep it da-da-da, da-da-da, da-da-da. Start on the top D. D, B, B flat, D. Yeah, that, faster. Okay, keep that in mind. Okay, let's go to Lucas. So this is back. I asked him to play backwards and upside down. So that was upside down, right? That was upside down? That was backwards. Do it again.
Yeah.
Do it again. And keep that in mind. Keep that one in mind especially. That sounds a little weird, doesn't it? But at that tempo, and that'll come back. All right. The ladies here, I gave them the task of taking the half step and doing something with the half step. Whatever you came up with. Okay. I can't think of an instance in Beethoven where that occurs in this sonata. And how about the lady in pink? That's very, very imaginative. I like that. What they did was this. They took this little figure, the D, A sharp, and B, and then they just put the D an octave lower. And then they sequenced it. It's pretty imaginative. Thank you for that. Okay, everyone sit down. I can't even get the where's the pointer? And then you fall. But as you do so, you have little appoggiatures that lean upwards. So you have a couple different directions. You leap up and fall, but as you fall, you're actually rising into each of the falling notes with that with those appoggiaturas. And the bass is rising arpeggio. So we have a falling arpeggio and rising arpeggio. Now Beethoven, as we all know, most of us know, he was deaf. So by the time he wrote this sonata, he was already hard of hearing. By the end of his life, he couldn't hear at all. And the only way to converse with him was to write a question in a book, and then he would look at it and probably answer you with verbally. So we have these what are called conversation books with a lot of questions, but very few answers, because he would just speak the answer to whoever was writing the question. The main person that collected these conversation books was his secretary by the name of Anton Schindler. Anton Schindler took these books and he kept them for himself after Beethoven died, and he later used them as a basis for a biography of Beethoven that he wrote. And later he admitted that he made up some of the questions and conversations. In fact, he made up a lot of it. And so a lot of historians just disregard anything he says about Beethoven. I'm going to quote him on something that he said for a reason. It makes sense, and you see it again and again and again in Beethoven. So what if he took a principle or an idea that he and Beethoven discussed, but he made up the conversation about that idea? What I mean is this. The question was, how do you write such dramatic music? And what Schindler said was, Beethoven said, it's simple, two opposing ideas. What are the opposing ideas? A falling arpeggio against a rising arpeggio. And there's the tension. We have a falling arpeggio and a rising arpeggio. Those are the two different ideas, and these are the two basic ideas that create most of the ideas of the music in this entire sonata. Now, let's just look at the part that Jiwei played from beginning here, stop right there. Look at the left hand. In every instance, the left hand is simply a rising arpeggio, a three-note rising arpeggio. Can you play just the left hand? Thank you. Now, against that, the right hand has a series of falling arpeggios. Falling arpeggio, falling arpeggio, falling arpeggio. We leap upwards, but the whole line falls. And we have leaps up and down, down, down. So the right hand is constantly falling down, while the left hand is constantly rising against it. And it's those two differences that create the dramatic tension in the composition. Now, this also, over the course of the sonata, becomes developed. It intensifies. When you have somebody always saying one thing and another person saying the opposite thing, what do you have? If one person is saying one thing and the other person is saying always the opposite thing against you, what is that called? A marriage. This is called an argument. So Beethoven is showing an argument between two people. It's not a really violent argument. At one point it gets a little bit intense, but it's kind of like a comical argument. Now, let's look at the parts that we have. We have a rising arpeggio with a rising octave and a falling arpeggio, right? With a couple half steps. Let's look at the magic of Beethoven and the genius of Beethoven. How can you come up with different melodic ideas based on that? Well, you play just the octave in the beginning. You could almost say that's a development of an idea already, because you play a note, and you play the same note an octave higher. What if you played the same note in the same octave, the same note twice? That's a repeated note, right? Now let's look at how the melody begins after you end the introduction. This is where the introduction ends. After the introduction ends, what is the melody? And then? And then it spins up from there. So Beethoven takes the opening idea of a leap of an octave, and he says, okay, I'm leaping an octave, but it's really a repetition of the same note. When he takes that repetition and plays it again faster and a little bit louder, and that's how he starts the melody. And you go, when I saw that, I thought, oh my God, it's just a repeated note, but even just a simple repeated note has, in its origin, it's derived from that main idea. And I thought, you forgot already? I get it. Thank you. Now, let's look at the bass figuration. Can you play the bass? Okay. There's another quote that Ted Letvin at the University of Michigan gave me. And he said, he was explaining something to me in a score, and he said, you know, Frank, by this point in Beethoven's career, every single note that he wrote was very important. Nothing was by chance. And that really stuck with me. And of course I asked him, what does that mean? Yes. Well, you're crazy, you're insane. What are you talking about? But he was right. Now, what is the opening gesture in the left hand? A rising arpeggio. And what is the gesture here? A rising arpeggio. And then you have the connector note. So we have a rising arpeggio, rising arpeggio, rising arpeggio, and one note in between that connects them. Now, to prove to you that this is the perfect accompaniment, I'm going to ask Jiwei to play the melody, but instead of playing the bass as written here, using an Alberti bass that Mozart might have used. Da-dee, 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 da-dee. Yeah. And play the melody. Okay, it's not terrible, but it completely changes the feel of the music. Okay, what if you were to play, Mozart does this a lot in his accompaniments as well. What if you were to play like this? Instead of... Can you do that? That really is bad. That's terrible. It just doesn't make any sense. Now play it the way the man wrote it. And it makes sense. It works. So in Beethoven, in Mozart, a lot of times the left hand just outlines a chord, and it's kind of slow. Sometimes it's a little bit faster. But the main purpose of the left hand is to keep the music moving and not interfere with the beautiful melody. With Beethoven, everything is motivic. Everything is important. And so when we look at the left hand parts, you have to understand how the left hand is derived from the basic idea, or else you can miss the point. For example, let's go to the beginning of the D major section. Now what if you were to play it like an accompaniment, you just keep it nice and quiet in the background? That sounds totally wrong, doesn't it? So if you understand the dramatic tension and where it comes from, it's an intensification of that opening octave. Suddenly the whole thing makes more sense. So it's not an accompaniment, it's actually motivic and critical to the music. In fact, it's an intensification of the argument. Let's go back to the beginning. I said, I think this is an argument. Let's say that it is an argument.
Mm-hmm.
It's an argument between what? Two people? A man and a man, a woman and a woman, a man and a woman? Parvati? It's an argument between whom? A man and woman, right? Because that's always the most interesting, but it's also very logical by looking at the argument. The gentleman in the red shirt in the back, yes. What is your name? Yes, you. Elvin? Okay. Which one is the woman? This one or this one? Intuitively, what do you think? Yes. What is the guy doing? He's interrupting her. He's interrupting her. And so if you play it like an interruption where the beginning is D, B, like you're starting an idea and you can't finish it because the left hand is intruding. Can you make the left hand sound like an intrusion? And suddenly that makes sense. Just play the whole thing musically and nice, but basically flat. That just completely misses the point. And so this is what I mean when I say if you understand where these parts come from, and you understand the drama behind them, you can really play the music in a much more dramatic way. And then, of course, so the man interrupts the woman, right? And he's thinking, if I just interrupt her enough, she'll just stop. And any guy that's ever argued with his wife knows that she's not going to stop until she gets her point across. That's what's happening here. It's like, I'm going to keep talking until I'm done. That's why I say Beethoven totally understood this. He never got married himself. He never had a recorded history of a girlfriend for very long. He was of low birth and he was poor. And he didn't take baths regularly, but he wanted to date princesses and countesses, and he had no chance. So he was, for who he was at his time, he just was out of his league, and he never got married. But I don't know how he did it, but he just figured out human psychology and he just nailed it. Okay. Another interesting question, and for me, there are a couple of O moments in here. We have, at the very beginning, a couple of half steps. Can you play these half steps, G-Way? Now, what if you were to repeat the half step, one after the next? Not da-dee-da-da, but one after the next and in sequence. Like this. Yeah, half step here. You have a chromatic scale. And so the lead-in from the end of the first theme into the second theme is A chromatic scale. How about that? And the melody began in the first half with a repeated note on the D, right? If you remember, right here. And how does the entire section end, leading to the second theme? With repeated notes. And so the section begins and ends with repeated notes. The whole thing is neatly tied together. And the way that we get there is through an ascending stepwise chromatic scale, which comes from the opening idea. That was another. Oh, I get it. Giant, great big. Oh my God, I get it. Now, seriously, I tell you these little stories about my life as a student that happened about 20 to 30 years ago. And some of these things that I'm telling you about, honestly, these professors just dropped these little thought bombs in, but they wouldn't explain it. And I thought through this stuff for like the last 2 to 3 decades, like 30 years puzzling this out. You might think, you spent 30 years thinking about this stuff? Yeah, I'm a compulsive obsessive and I just can't let something go. And so a guy I admire and that I think is really smart tells me everything is connected. I have to figure out why. And so when I figured that out, when I figured out how this silly, goofy little melody comes from the opening, for me it was like a major triumph. I was so excited. I can see all the looks on your face. You're like, yeah, okay. I can't wait for dessert. I want an ice cream. But for me, this was like, oh my God, this is amazing. All right, let's go on. So the ideas are still going against. Now she takes on the double notes. She's taking on the part of the man. She's taking the man's argument and turning it against him. And what can the guy say? Okay. And so he follows her. And who leads this time now? The woman leads, and the man agrees and says yes. And so if you understand this and play it like this, the whole thing is like a conversation or a drama or a piece of theater. And the audience may not know, but they'll hear the performance and the understanding of the performance and they'll go, this feels right. It sounds right, something about this just makes sense. And you've heard it when Ji-wei was playing, when he plays everything musically but just kind of flat, it just doesn't work. But when he plays it with the understanding of this is an argument or this is two people and they're having a moment, it makes a lot more sense. Now let's go back to the opening and see if we can find a couple other things in here that are moments or aha moments. G minor, how about that? And later in this movement, Beethoven modulates to the key of, you start here, B flat major. And so by this point in his career, Beethoven would take even the long-range architecture of a piece of music and base that upon the opening melody and the opening motif. And if you don't believe me, that's okay. Just look at the Emperor Piano Concerto in E flat major. Look at the Hammerklavier Piano Sonata, and he does the same thing in these great compositions. And I won't tell you how. I'll leave that for you to figure out. And if you're lucky and you work really hard, maybe it'll only take you 3 decades, maybe 2. But when you figure it out on your own, believe me, it'll be much more satisfying than if I just tell you the answer. Okay. All right, we have a couple more minutes. I'm going to skip to the couple portions. So, thanks, Jay. Where does that accompaniment figure come from? Here. And so even accompaniment patterns are intimately linked to the opening. Yes, Mark? Okay. Okay. Then later when we have the big climax of the piece in the left hand, can you play the bass from here, Ji-wei? Right from here. Oops, from there. That's the same melody that we heard in the very beginning, now played much slower and stretched out. We have the leap of an octave, then the half steps. Okay. The same idea that becomes a bass line, in fact, the bass melody. Okay. I'm going to skip ahead now to the finale. Just a couple things here. Okay. Can you play just the first four measures, please? Okay. This is an idea that uses a couple different ideas from the opening idea, the opening motif. If you remember, what does Beethoven do with the opening octave? He fills it in. So instead of a leap of an octave, we have a rising scale. It fills it in. And includes that little turn. And so he transforms into, and that becomes the main idea in the third movement. Let's skip ahead to right here. Now remember in the second theme of the first movement we had the bass lines like this. He does something similar, except he fills in that octave with triplets. It's just this. And so instead of, we have a rising scale, and instead of leaping, he gives you chords. Thank you. All right, now we're going to move ahead, and I want to show just one more spot. This is where I asked Lucas to play the piece upside down, right? Let's go to the last page of the entire composition. Okay. Can you start? Sounds like something completely different that you've never heard before, right? How is this connected? What is the direction of the accompaniment in the left hand? It's a rising arpeggio of 3 notes. So that comes from the very first left hand accompaniment we have. But now, very fast. Can you play just the right hand? Backwards, and you get the closing theme of the whole composition. Just the left, the right hand here. And there we go. Every tiny little melody from the beginning to the end comes from this strange, weird, almost non-melody. But if you have a really incredible imagination, play with an idea, just look at that sheet of paper I gave you, and use these ideas, you can figure out where all of these ideas come from. Now, the last piece of the puzzle is, how do you make sense of this? You do all this analysis, and you might have a couple of aha moments, but so what? But when I was working with GUA, we worked out how to make this sound the best, how to make the most music out of it, how to squeeze music out of every measure. Can you play just the opening right hand gesture? It sounded best when you followed the shape of the line, crescendoed up to the D and faded away. Can you try that? And I remember what Ted told me when he said, you have to understand how the piece is put together, and then you have to play all of these themes in a way that shows the relationship, but not in a way that is too obvious. And I thought, how do you do that? Was he just making stuff up to make things difficult? Did he just want to seem profound by saying something totally ridiculous? I thought, well, let's just try it. So at one of our lessons, I asked G. Wade, whenever that shape returned in the music to shape the music in a similar way, where we would lead upwards, crescendo, and then fall, have a diminuendo. And even in something as seemingly unrelated as this. Okay. So it just says F there, nothing more. And we worked on several different versions of playing this, and the version that Dewey arrived at that sounded the best was when he followed the shape, crescendoed up to the A, and had a long diminuendo. And that dynamically followed the shape of the opening gesture of the entire sonata. Can you play it just like that? And whenever we did something like that in the entire piece, everything started to make more sense. And we tried many different variations, like starting loud and just getting quieter, or starting slightly quieter and getting louder. But whenever we shaped a melody, like we did in the opening, everything started to make more sense, even the left-hand parts, or the accompaniments. So that's the final link of the chain. You do all of this work, and you figure out a shape that makes sense, and play that shape in a similar way through all the melodies. Okay, I had a lot